This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, I'll just say that we're actually very grateful to have Deanna and Annalise be part of our H3Africa family. And while they don't often come to the consortium meetings, they have on occasion, and we're planning to come to this one. So I think are disappointed not to be able to meet you all in person, but hopefully we'll come again in future years. And just as many of you know, they play a really important role in making sure that you all are funded. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deanna.
Hi, thank you, and good morning. Yes, I can tell you that Annalise and I are both very disappointed that we didn't get to come, but health and welfare of participants and families are more important, and we completely understand, and we hope to see you next year, and as we get closer to closing out this round of grants, we'll probably be talking to you a lot more. The presentation today is called NIH Grants from Appetizer to Dessert, and we kind of named it this because we're going to be talking about from when you first apply for a grant. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting it to go. I'm having trouble with the presentation moving. There we go. So funding opportunity announcements when you want to apply for funding, and then what the different roles and responsibilities are, both from your side and also from the NIH side. And then when you finally get an award, the notice of award, what the terms and conditions of that award are. And then as you're working through a grant, there are times that you need prior approvals. And who, what, when, and how you can get those, and who and why to ask. Then we also have the payment management system, and that's how the funds are transferred from NIH to your institution. And there's some lessons learned and some bumps in the road that we've come across. We want to share those with you to try and help, so that you all don't have the same problems come up when you're working with payment management. And then finally, we're going to touch on grants closeout. And this is important because the federal government requires all awarding agencies to close out grants in a timely manner. And that means that we are relying on our awardees to also provide us the information we need to do that. So these are the things we're going to talk about today. We had another presentation for the PI meeting that's a little more detailed on some of these items, and we hope to be able to get that scheduled in the next week or two. It had a lot more detail about like prior approvals and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Annalise and I are going to take turns. And if we can hold questions till the end, that would be great. If something I say doesn't make any sense right at that moment, feel free to, interrupt me and say, hey, you didn't make any sense, Deanna. And then we'll keep going from there, okay? So I'm going to get started first talking about funding opportunities. And NIH has several types of funding opportunities. Everything that we do is a funding opportunity. To apply for a grant, you have to apply to one of our funding opportunity announcements. There are different kinds. There are program announcements, which are PA. So you'll see PA dash and then some letters. And those are just kind of standard due dates. Sometimes, we are a little prescriptive in what we're looking for, but generally it's kind of wide open, especially parent announcements, like a parent R01 application. That's really investigator initiated. You came up with a great idea, you want to apply, and this is the type of announcement you would apply to. They're usually active for 3 years, and we can renew those. So those are kind of ongoing types of announcements. We also have what's called a PAR and PAS. A PAR is a program announcement. It just has special review, receipt, and referral criteria. So that's the difference there. And for a PAS, it means that the institute or center has a set aside of funds that they want to pay that particular announcement out of. Then there's also an RFA. And an RFA is a request for applications. And that's a very much more narrowly defined scope of work that we want people to apply to. And that means that the institute or center has something very detailed that they're trying to find out, and they're putting an announcement out so that awardees can come in with their ideas about how to meet that particular goal. They are the portal to apply for grants with the government. It's the only way to apply for us. And funding opportunity announcements actually have terms and conditions of award included. So that's important. You always want to check the eligibility of your institution to apply before you craft an application. And I am hopeful that this link will work. It did. Let me move this over so you can see it. There we go. So this is the funding opportunity that I just clicked on the link to. And it's the parent R01 research project that NIH funds. And it's all the institutes and centers at NIH are participating in this announcement. And that's important. You want to know which institutes or centers participate. The next thing you want to do is you want to look for eligibility. And scroll down, there's a table of contents. And this is where you click on section 3, eligibility information. When you go there, it will link you to the eligible organizations. Here is where you'll find out if non-U.S. entities can apply. They'll be listed under foreign institutions. And you want to make sure when you look at a funding opportunity, the very first thing is that, are you eligible to apply? Because you don't want to craft an application and then not be able to actually submit it. Okay? So I'm getting a little feedback. Maybe someone is not on mute. If you can mute for me, that'd be great. Thank you. And then finally, one of the more important things is to read the entire funding opportunity announcement, because that's what you're agreeing to do when you apply for funding from the NIH. And that's why I said there are terms and conditions included in every funding opportunity. So what you want to do is you want to know, where do I find the science in the opportunity and where do I find the rules? So the science. The science is going to be found in section 1, which talks about the description. It gives the background on the NIH Institute or Center. It gives important definitions. It states what the objectives are that we're trying to achieve through this opportunity, and it states the area of research interest that we have, and it also tells you what we're not going to be supporting. That's important, because if you're writing an application that's very cancer-centric and it's not something that NHGRI would be funding, that will be included, that we are not looking for cancer-centric applications. So always look for the research interest to make sure you're seeing what it is that that institute or center is looking for. And then also section 4, that's the application, kind of tells you exactly how to apply and what we're looking for, and the research strategy is what we're looking for scientifically. That's where we want to tell you, this is the strategy we want you to look for, tell us how you're going to do this, and that's, you know, very important for the review criteria as well, because the reviewers are going to be looking to see if that research strategy is what we're looking for. The rules are pretty much all through the FOA, but these sections in particular include rules and requirements. Section 2, which is award information. The award information includes budgetary information, includes how many years we're willing to fund. It talks about a lot of the requirements for, you know, applying. Section 3, of course, eligibility. What institutions are able to apply and what persons are able to be PIs on grant. That's important as well. How to submit your application. You know, you have to use grants.gov, or you have to apply using the assist module, which is NIH's module. And then in section 6, this is important because it's award administration information, and this section will include cooperative agreement terms and conditions, and cooperative agreements are U-type applications. And those are specific terms and conditions that are referenced in every notice of award for a cooperative agreement. So we will always point back to that, and that is also something you're required to respond to. The FOA in its entirety is a term and condition of award. So best practice, read it completely through. I'm going to turn over now to Annalise for roles and responsibilities.
Good morning, everybody. So basically, we're going to go over several of the most common roles and responsibilities and how these affect your different organizations. The first one, and the most imperative, is your signing official. This is the person who is your legally binding authority. They bind your institution to deal with all grant matters, including accepting the award. They provide signature to confirm that all information being submitted is accurate. In addition, they are the ones that are going to register your institution in the Commons. They have the ability to do several of these other tasks, such as create and delete all Commons accounts, create affiliations for an existing principal investigator, submit or reject applications, meaning if the program has sent them an application, they can reject it back to program so that it can be redone, and they are ultimately the person who submits it in the Commons to the NIH for review. They review the application images and submit everything within the organization through the Commons. In addition, the signing official also can only be affiliated with one organization. They cannot have multiple affiliations with multiple organizations, and they also can only have one. They can have a combined administrative role, but it cannot include a scientific role. That requires a separate role within the Commons. The SO also reviews all the information, but they do not get to review the summary statement. That goes to the principal investigator. They submit the JIT, the just-in-time request, to the Commons. They're also going to route and review all I-RPPRs. They can also request your first no-cost extension if your award is eligible for that. And they also will submit all closeout documents, which we'll discuss at the end of this presentation. The next person is your financial status report role. This is imperative when it comes to closeout because these are the people who are going to be submitting your FFR, which is your quarterly reporting and your final reporting for the grant, letting us know how much funds you've expended on the grant. And it also assists us if you come in for what they call a no-cost extension, as well as any carryover requests. Carryover requests in FFR is very pertinent when submitting a carryover request. We must have an accurate FFR. The FFR, the signing official can also hold that FFR role. However, they need to make sure that everything is very clarified as to what role they're using because the FFR role is separate from their signing official role. The other issue with the FFR is there are time deadlines when submitting your FFR. For submitting your annual FFR, you have 90 days from the calendar quarter end of the budget period. And for your final FFR, all reports are due within 120 days of the project period end date. Next one, Deanna. Other administrative roles that are commonly seen in the Commons, this is your administrative official. This is somebody who does not have signing authority. However, they can go in and review information. They can route progress reports to their signing official, but they are not authorized to submit applications to the NIH. They also can only be affiliated with one organization. It is also possible for your signing official and your administrative official to be the same person. However, the signing official is the one who has the authority to submit your applications and supersedes any authority given to the administrative official. You can scroll down. The next one is an account administrator. This is a very basic role within the Commons. They don't have much access, but they also can only be affiliated with one organization, and it can be combined with another administrative role. However, it cannot be combined with a scientific role. Next one. Another important role, this is a scientific role. This is your principal investigator. This is the person who is designated by the awardee organization to direct the project. They are responsible and accountable to the awardee, meaning your institution, for the proper conduct of the project or activity. They also are the ones who will be checking the status of their applications. They will be assembling their applications. They will be reviewing their summary statements. They also have access to pertinent other information regarding their grant to which they are designated a PI on. This also comes into play when you're dealing with multiple PIs. Multiple PIs meaning you have one who is a contact PI, but all PIs will have access to the information within the Commons, but only one of them is going to respond, and that is the contact PI. The PI can delegate the ability to another user at their institution within the Commons to edit their research progress reports and the assist role to view the status information of an application except for their outcomes and summary statements. Those items cannot be redelegated to somebody else. The principal investigator should only ever have one commons account throughout their career. So as your principal investigator, as you change institutions, make sure you update your commons account to the new current information for your institution, i.e. your email address, your phone number, your address, because that follows you with all your grant applications. The roles within the government offices. We have the Chief Grants Management Officer, which at Human Genome is Deanna Ingersoll. They are the ones who provide us with our overall leadership within our grant administration. They also have the final authority. If there's a major concern or issue, we will take it to the Chief GMO and they will make an ultimate decision as to how the grant is going to be administered. Next one, Deanna. The next one, and the most common person you're going to talk to, is your grants management officer. Their name is going to appear on the NOA, and let me see if the link works. No. I know on another, see if you can get it to open, Deanna.
Annalise, it's just opening to the grants policy statement.
That's fine. On another, if you're able to see when we're able to do the next presentation to the PIs, we do have a very specific section that we go over the notice of award and the different parts to it, and we will show you exactly where you would find the name of your grants management officer, which is your person to contact. You also would find that within the comments, you'll see a name assigned to a GMS. That's the person you want to contact for your day-to-day management of your award.
I want to say that we're going to share these slides, and these links will be active for you, so you'll be able to go to these different places to be able to see where we're getting this information as well.
GMO/GMS is a focal point when receiving and acting on requests. For example, prior approval. Only your GMS and a revised notice of award can be used to approve a prior approval. Your program officer is unable to do that. Any change in terms and conditions, we would issue you a revised notice of award. It is very imperative that whenever you're doing communication that involves your day-to-day management of your grant that potentially requires a revised notice of award or change to the terms and conditions of your award, that you include your grants management specialist on that correspondence. Okay. And then you have the grants management specialist. They're kind of in conjunction with your grants management officer. They're always your first point of contact for your grants administration. They evaluate your grant, they administer your grant, they're making sure you stay within all the guidelines that are in the notice of award as well as in the FOA that Deanna just recently talked about. They help you with the negotiations of your grant so that you're using your money, the money is assigned accordingly and used appropriately. And we're also there for any questions or consultations that you may have regarding the administration of your grant. We also work on the grants closeout, which Deanna will talk about later in this presentation. Then we get to the program officer. This is your scientific contact within the government office. The program officer is in charge of the scientific and technical aspects of the assigned application grants. Their responsibilities are to review the research training programs, and to ensure that it reaches the IC's mission. They do not have the authority, as I just stated earlier, to provide approval for grant administrative actions, such as prior approval, which would, for example, be a carryover. However, your program officer and your GMO work closely together to discuss these matters. So when you're working on those, make sure you include both parties. The next page, as Deanna just stated, has links to all the information we provided above, so you can see how the roles and responsibilities are, as well as some helpful user guides on how you assign people within the commons and how the different registrations work. I'm now going to turn it over to Deanna. She's going to talk about your notice of award terms and conditions.
Thank you. We do have somebody, it seems, that needs to mute their phone, getting a little feedback there. Thanks. So the notice of award is important for everyone to read, and we say everyone, including the administrators at an awarding institution, the PI, the signing official, the department administrator, need to read it, and you want to read it from first page to last page, because it is a legally binding document. It's the legal document we issue to notify when an award has been made, and that funds can be requested from the payment management system, which is the HHS payment system. We issue for initial budget periods of up to 12 months, and then subsequent budget periods in the approved project. So there could be a 3-year project, but we'll give you 12 months at a time. And then the notice of award will tell you what those future year commitments are. Those are commitments, but it does not mean that that is what we will provide in the next year. It depends on the budget we get from Congress. Sometimes Congress doesn't give us the budget we expected, and then we have to make adjustments. So just understand that that's what we plan to do, but it doesn't mean that's actually what we can do in future years. It also includes all the terms and conditions of the award, including all the reporting requirements. You will get a new NOA issued for each year of the project. And then if we have to revise the award along the way during that particular year, we call the current year, then you'll get a revised notice of award for that current project or budget period in the year. It is important that you have an email address in the Commons identified as the notice of award email. It's a very specific email field in your area Commons institutional profile, because that's how we email the notice of award. We don't send them out in paper anymore. We don't mail them. It's only available through that email address, and then the PI will also be able to see it within his or her Commons account as latest notice of award. If you don't have that email notification address, we won't be able to, you won't get the notices of award. You won't know when they've come in. So there's a lot of information included on a notice of award, and I'm not going to go through every bit of this. It's a detailed couple of lists to tell you all the information that you will find in a notice of award. I think it's important to point out the approved period of performance is important, the budget that we've approved, and the amount of federal funds that we've obligated. If there's cost sharing or matching, which I would just tell you that NIH for the most part does not require matching. There was only one program where they did, and generally we do not. The total amount of the award and anticipated future year commitments if it's applicable, if there's a future year. It also tells you who the Institute or Center PO, GMO, and GMS are, and that's so that you know who to contact. The indirect cost rate, of course, for our non-U.S. awardees, we provide 8% indirect costs on a modified total direct cost basis. Applicable terms of award either by reference or inclusion, and when we say reference or inclusion, that's because there's a lot of terms and conditions included that you might not be aware of. And then the performance goals, such as the reporting, like the progress report, the RPPR, or the final RPPR when the project's going to end. And then any restrictions on the use of funds. Grant numbers, once we break them down, they're sort of easy to understand, but this is a typical grant number, and we put the little red bars to show you this is where the different pieces of the grant number are. So the first thing we have is the application type. There are different types of applications. There's a type 1 or a type 2, which we call competing awards. Type 5 is what we call the non-competing awards. Supplements are type 3s. That's how you would know when we say a supplement, we're probably looking for something that starts with a 3. The activity code is the type of grant. Is it a research project? Is it a cooperative agreement? The institute or center code, which is the administering institution, or for HHS, it's the operational division, something we call an OpDiv. The serial number, that's unique. That's unique to that specific project. And when we are conversing in the email, we're always going to say, can you give me the grant number? And that's the piece that we really need more than anything else is the serial number, because that's how we look it up. The support year tells what year of support. So 01's a brand new grant. 07 is the 7th year of a grant. And a suffix code, which is optional, which is supplements, amendments, things like that. These are the different types, like I mentioned before. And what I do is I put the ones you are most likely to see in bold print. The others, maybe, maybe not. But for most of you, you will see type 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s, maybe a 7 if there's a change of institution involved. So terminology, I don't want to go through all of this. This is more for your information. When we're talking about something, we say what type of grant, what's the project title, that's what we're looking for. And then AOR, which is also the business official. This is the authorized personalities talked about, the GMO, GMS program officer. And then the budget period and project period. The budget period is an interval of time, usually 12 months. The project period is the total time of support. Again, we fund based on budget periods, so intervals. This is just what it looks like with all of these different pieces identified so that you know where to look for the information. So if you take the previous slides that have all the different bullets and then look at this example, you'll see where to find that information in your notice of award. Now, it's important to read the whole notice of award because of what it means when you accept it. As soon as you draw down that very first dollar of U.S. funds from the payment management system and spend it, it signifies that the awarding organization has accepted all of the terms and conditions associated with that award. And they are at NIH discretion and not subject to appeal. So you want to read the notice of award before you spend the first dollar. That's very important. And this is where it says this. In the notice of award, it actually says when you draw it down, you've accepted it. That's important. This is another screenshot of what the notice of award looks like. This tells you the amount of authorized funding. This is what we can possibly do in future years. This also tells you this segment. So terms of award are legally binding, and they are found in sections 3 and 4 of the notice of award. They accompany every notice of award that we issue. They're informative or restrictive. They are often applied to clarify funding or issues with human subjects or animals. They come from multiple places. The authorizing program legislation, and that's the legislation that sets up the actual operation of, in our example, NIH as a federal agency in the Department of Health and Human Services. The grants policy statement. There is a section specific for grants to foreign institutions and international organizations, but the grants policy statement is a term and condition of award for every award as well. Administrative requirements are included, and then programmatic requirements, such as the cooperative agreement terms we talked about that you would find in a funding opportunity. And this is where you can see the Section 3 terms and conditions and where the grants policy statement is included as a term. And then it also will tell you things like carryover, if you have to request carryover before spending funds that were from the previous year. Section 4 is where NHGRI will put specific terms and conditions on. So the cooperative agreement term we talked about. This is when we include by reference. It does say this is a cooperative agreement, this is the name of the program, here's a link to get to it, but the entire RFA is a term and condition of award. And then the contacts. You always find the contacts in Section 5. This is who to write to, email to, call, and who you should send your questions to first. And remember, administrative questions should go to the grant specialist with a CC to the program officer, and then scientific questions to the program officer. Again, this is my plug. Remember to read the notice of award start to finish. And this is a true story. We had an awardee who, the principal investigator, he didn't know about the restriction on funds because when he got the notice of award, his administrative official handed him the page that talked about the money, but didn't hand him the page that talked about all the terms that went along with that money. So he had spent money that was restricted from being used and didn't know why we said, well, you weren't able to use those funds. And he said, well, why? And it was in that section that he didn't ever get to read. So that's why I say you want to read every page So you don't get the whole thing, say I need the whole thing. And Annalise is going to talk to you about prior approvals because this is important.
So a prior approval is a written approval from the designated GMO. It is specific to a post-award change in the approved budget or project period. If approved, a revised notice of award will be issued. That's the only time you will know a prior award has been formally approved. If disapproved, you will receive an email from the grants management staff assigned to your grant indicating the reasons why. All prior approvals should be submitted no later than 30 days prior to the proposed change. On most occasions, we do not backdate a prior approval request. We use the date of receipt of the request as the first date that the request can start. So, for example, if you submit us a request on December 1st and you want charges going back to October 1st, we would not backdate it back to October 1st. We would only allow charges going from December 1st forward. These are the preferred method for sending a prior approval request currently is through the ERA Commons. However, if need be, the authorized representative / signing official can email that information to the grants management specialist. The requests do need to come in English because we are unable to translate a lot of those documents. The responses and determinations by the grants management office are valid, are the only valid response you should have, and you must obtain prior approval before undertaking the activity you're proposing in your prior approval request. Next page. This is an example of some of the prior approval requests that we commonly see. A carryover and unobligated balance. That's an amount that was left over on your prior year FFR that is restricted from use. A change in scope in the award. That is something that's been discussed between the awardee, the principal investigator, and the grants management specialist so that we are all in the same loop. A change in key personnel, which is somebody who's been named on the notice of award, or a change in the single/multi-PI status. A change to a non-U.S. entity involved in the research, meaning you're moving your research from one hospital to another within your country. We would need to get prior approval so that we can document that. Late first no-cost extensions or second no-cost extensions. And change to the awardee organization. That is the type 7 that Deanna mentioned on her types of actions you would see in a notice of award. The next page gives you helpful links as to what allowable costs are, as well as what are all the prior approval requirements, as well as the tutorial on how to enter your prior approval into the Commons, which currently, from what I'm understanding from other awardees, is a very simple process, but you can always email your grants management specialist if you have a question. And I'm going to turn it over to Deanna.
Thank you. So the next section is talking about the payment management system, and we're not really going to show you how to use the payment management system. We would think that if you need help on how to navigate the payment management system, you really want to talk to the person at Payment Management or the Payment Service Center for that. But this is more some of the bumps in the road and lessons that have been learned by previous awardees and things to watch out for, to do, to not do, so that you don't have problems down the road. So the first thing is the rules and regulations about the payment management system. You can make requests as often as you need them out of the payment management system. Because it's an electronic funds transfer, you don't need us to mail you something. The funds are put into an account, and that account is then linked to a bank account that you have set up. So you can go in and make the request as you need it. It can be daily, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly. The caveat is, for the payment management system, is that funds have to be spent within 3 business days after you draw them down out of the system. And that's the U.S. Treasury regulations. The federal cash has to be drawn solely for immediate needs on an as-needed basis and cannot be held more than 3 working days. That's the rules that we have to work under with the U.S. Treasury. Sorry, trying to get to advance. There we go. The reason is that the regulations do this to minimize negative impact of federal cash withdrawals on the public debt and related financing costs for the federal government. So at no time should cash be requested to cover unliquidated encumbrances, obligations, or accrued expenditures until you actually need them, until they're anticipated. And with certain exceptions, U.S. federal funds are required to be maintained in interest-bearing bank accounts. These are, again, the rules and regulations. So here's the problem if you're a non-U.S. awardee. The first problem is you need advance of funds to get your project started. We realize that to actually get going, you know, a lot of our awardees outside the U.S. are hiring contractors, and in order to do that, you have to have the funds to be able to hire them. And that doesn't necessarily comply with the 3 working day rule. The other problem are currency fluctuations. Markets are volatile. Exchange rates can change dramatically, even overnight. And before the payment management system, we had an awardee who had received his funds, which we used to do by check 3 times a year. And there happened to be a national election going on. And the awardee got the money, put it in the account. It translated great at that time until the election was over, and then the real value of the money was made known after the president had been reelected. He had inflated the value of the money, and that grant lost its value by half overnight. And that's half the grant was gone just because of the currency change. So we understand that the volatile markets and the currency exchanges are a real problem. There are home country There are home country banking regulations that may not work with the rule about interest-bearing accounts. Some banking regulations in your home country require deposition into your national central bank, and you don't earn interest on that. And that does not necessarily comply with the federal rule, U.S. federal rule about interest-bearing. And then, of course, internal institutional policies, what we call the proverbial red tape. How long it takes to submit an invoice for payment and how to get those payments processed. So some of the lessons we've learned is don't pull all the funds out of payment management account at one time. You absolutely do not want to do that. It is a red flag for potential misuse of funds or criminal activity. It is the first thing that when we see all the money's been drawn down at one time that we say, wait, something's wrong. And it could be just a misunderstanding, but it's the first thing that we look at to say that we think there's a problem. The other problem is we can't act on a request for a no-cost extension or a carryover if all the money is out of your payment management account because it doesn't look like you have any left. Once there's no money left, we consider the grant to be over. And that is the rule. Once the funds are spent, the grant is ended. Even if you're still working, there's no more money, so we consider the grant ended. And your institution might be required to return the funds in U.S. dollars due to an overdraw, but you have to use the rate that's current, not the one that was in place when the funds were pulled out of payment management. So you may lose a lot of money just in the exchange if you're required to return the funds. So don't draw them down all at once. Draw them as you need them. Your institution will have a process or should set up a process for how often you can draw down funds and how you're going to do that. The other problem is the amount of money that's available, and I put that in quotes, in payment management is not necessarily the amount that's authorized for spending in a given budget period. And the reason is that the payment management account is a cumulative account. Every time we award funds, it starts to accumulate in that account for that grant. But if your particular project does not have prior approval, the amount of money that's remaining at the end of one budget period becomes restricted as soon as it ends. So it may look like you have it to spend, but you're not allowed to spend it without coming in for prior approval first. So you really want to make sure that your notice of award, you understand if you have the authority to carry over funds automatically or if you have to ask for that. And then to understand that whatever amount of money you've reported on an annual FFR as unobligated becomes restricted as soon as that happens on a grant that doesn't have carryover. The other thing is we can see balances in real time. We can see how much we've awarded, and then also as you're drawing it down, we can see it in real time. So we know how the money's being spent. If you don't get prior approval for the use of restricted funds, we could disallow the cost and you would have to pay that back. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your account as well as your notice of award to know what you actually can do. And grants closeout. Annalise, do you want me to take this one? Are you muted, Annalise?
Danny, you can go ahead and take it, yes.
Okay. So grants closeout. We've had a couple of grants that were awarded in the H3Africa program of grants that have actually closed out. And what we found is that there were some misunderstandings about how to close out a grant. So this is the rules as they stand right now. And the reason I say as they stand right now is that the HHS is actually going to change the NIH requirements. We don't know exactly what they're going to be, but they are going to align with the rest of the federal government. We had been under stricter rules until recently. When they align with the rest of the federal government, these reporting dates may change. We don't know that yet, but this is the rules as they are right now. So as a recipient of a grant, when your project has ended and it's done, there's no more competing renewals and nothing's going to happen after your grant, you do have to submit some documents within 120 calendar days of the end of that project. The first one is your federal financial report. It's the final one. It's accounting for everything that has been spent on the grant. It's showing any money that hasn't been spent. There are no such things as unliquidated obligations on this final report. And it does have to match what's in payment management. Then there's the final research project performance report, your final RPPR. It's required to provide a progress report at the end of the project. And then a final invention statement of certification. If there's been any inventions or patents that have come out of the research, you do have to report those. Timely and accurate reporting is the recipient responsibility. And what happens when we don't get the reports on time, or the reports we need on, in an accurate fashion, it puts the grant into what we call unilateral closeout. Bilateral closeout is where the grant's open for closeout, you're submitting the documents, it comes in through the commons, and these do have to come through the commons. Everything's great, we can close the grant, no problems. After a certain point, which is at day 180, after the grant ends, it will go into what we call unilateral closeout, in which the NIH can take enforcement action. So that's why you want to make sure you're getting your reports in. The final progress report has replaced, the final research performance progress report has replaced the FPR. That was from January of 2017. The format's pretty much the same as your annual RPPR with a few differences. You do have a new section called Project Outcomes, which is Section I. And that's where you have to write in layman's terms the outcomes of your project. You don't submit budgets, Section H. The Section F changes is not required because there's nothing else, you're not making any changes, there's nothing else to go to. And then Section D, you only have to report Section D1 for participants, and that's it. Due dates have not changed. They are due 120 days after. If there were a renewal application, and this is new because some of you had renewal applications this year, and I think this was a little confusing. If you have a renewal application or a Type 2 competing award, there's still a progress report required now for that final year of the previous competitive segment. In the past, what NIH said is that if you have a renewal application, and you can put your progress report in that renewal, and that will count in lieu of the progress report. That is no longer the rule, and it has since February of 2017, we require an actual separate progress report, even if you have a Type 2. So it looks just like the final RPPR is submitted just like the final RPPR. 120 days after that project period ended, even though you have a Type 2. It just becomes an interim if the Type 2 renewal application is funded. If the Type 2 renewal application is not funded, it just becomes the final RPPR. But that is important for anyone who has a type 2 that they have just been funded. You have an interim RPPR due. You want to make sure you're looking for that link in the Commons. Finally, for closeout, if we have to initiate unilateral closeout, we do it as a last resort. If we can't get the information we need, and we only have 270 days to do this. And that's where the difference is. They actually are going to change the rules so that we have a full year like everybody else in the federal government. But right now we only have 270 days. At day 270, we will close the grant. If we don't have a final FFR, we will close the grant, putting the institution, the recipient institution, into debt status with the federal government. So it's important on the closeouts that the documents are submitted on time. This is the reminder on unilateral closeout. The FFR, we have to use the lower amount. Whatever is lower in payment management, that's what we have to use. You should not have any discrepancies. If we do use a low amount, it will put you into debt status with the federal government, in which you will have to repay those funds. And it will affect any other grant applications you have at NIH. That's important. One grant can stop all of the NIH awards to your institution. So you don't want to go to unilateral closeout. The Central Closeout Center is who processes these. You send these in through the ERA Commons, and they're the ones that do the processing. The final interim RPPR and the final FFR are required to come in through the Commons. The final invention statement can be submitted electronically in the Commons, but you can also send it to this address if you're unable to, for some reason, put it in through the Commons. There is a way to submit the invention statement. That's the only document you can submit outside of the ERA Commons. Timely reports, this is how they affect the institution and the principal investigator. There are sanctions on institutions that don't meet the reporting requirements, such as removal of expanded authorities, corrective actions, or even delaying and withholding future awards. These are helpful links to the grants policy statement and different sources of information about closeout and the requirements, and also how to submit closeout documents in the ERA Commons. So this is the time when we ask if anyone has any questions.
I have a question. This is Nikki. So the interim RPPR, would that also apply for a no-cost extension, or would you just delay the final RPPR?
Okay, so are you asking if an interim RPPR has to be submitted if you've asked for a no-cost extension?
Correct.
No, if you're granted a no-cost extension, what that means is that we've extended that final budget period, so it's still active. That RPPR is not due until 120 days after that has ended. So if we've extended you for 6 extra months, then you have 6 extra months before you have to start thinking about that final or interim RPPR. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
We have a question in chat. Where do you find the interim RPPR link in eCommons to initiate the submission?
If it's due, it's not going to be due on the type 2. So you're not going to look at, you have to look by the grant. You don't want to look for like type 2 UO1 HG 12345-07. You want to look at type 5 HG UO1 12345-06. It's the previous year. The last year of the previous segment is where you will find that link for the interim RPPR. Did that answer your question?
So while we're waiting for more questions, this is Jennifer, and I just wanted to say one of the reasons that we asked Deanna and Annalise to go through all this is for everybody to understand that these are the rules that are laid out for us as well. These are the things that are non-negotiable. So Deanna does not have the authority from the US government to say, oh, it's okay, you can wait a few more days. So when we're telling you these are deadlines, these are deadlines. that can't be bent. And so we want to make sure that everybody stays within compliance, and we will do everything we can to help you. So if you are having trouble, please reach out to your grant management specialist or to your program officer, who can then put you in touch with the right people if we can't answer the questions. But just make sure you're in contact to us about things that you're not sure about, because we do want to keep everybody in compliance.
Hi, it's Deanna. Yeah, that's correct. We actually get a report from HHS on all of our grants that we haven't closed out, and it really is a hand slap on NIH when we have let one go past 270. So they're cracking down on us. That means that we can't give any leeway whatsoever. We have to have the reports on time. And again, it's 120 days after the grant ended to submit your final reports for closeout. So just, it's 4 months to work on getting your reports and getting the final pieces, from your sub-awardees and putting it all together and get your final financial reporting done as well, so that you get your invoices and can get those paid and then close out the financial part of the grant.
So I'm sure people must have more questions. If you can either just speak up directly or type them in the chat box. So the other thing I want to point out while we're waiting for more questions is the point about terms and conditions of award is really important, and that the notice of award does tell you that you are to comply with the cooperative agreements that are in the RFA, and this will become important for some of our later discussions that we're putting off because we don't have our in-person meeting. But for instance, the some of the terms of and conditions of award talk about sample sharing and data sharing. And so when you accept the money, you are agreeing to those terms. And I think that's important to know. And then the other thing is the authorized, what is authorized and what isn't. If you're not sure, check, because you've agreed not to do anything without pre-authorization that requires pre-authorization. So if you're not sure, always just check.
I just wanted to ask, and anybody can jump in here, if everyone knows where the copy of the NIH grants policy statement is kept at your institution. It's available online, but everyone should have access to it and know how to get to it so that you can look for information within that grants policy statement, because that's the outward facing policy for awardees. We have a lot of rules that come down to us from Congress and from Office of Management and Budget and the President and the Department of Health and Human Services, and we try to write that to provide to you in a way that makes a little more sense. And that's what the grants policy statement is the outward-facing policy that NIH must operate under. And so we put it out there for you. And I just hope you all know where to find that or how to get to that. We do have a question. Does the 30-day period for change inside apply for when a co-PI moves to a new institution and State Department clearance or approval is sought? 30-day period for change in site. Are you talking about the 30-day, you submit a prior approval request for a change in 30 days? Yes. There's a lot of administrative approvals we have to go through for awards outside of the United States. So if we're making an award to an institution outside of the U.S., there's additional administrative approvals we have to go through in order to get that approved for you. So we do need at least 30 days. If you know before then, that's great. You can always submit it before that, but at least 30 days is what we need.
And just to be clear, it might take us more than 30 days to give the approval, correct, Deanna?
Absolutely, because we don't know what is going to come up while we're seeking additional administrative approvals. There may be policies that we're not aware of that would slow us down. So yes.
But you fulfilled your requirement by submitting it within 30 days of when.
Right. And we'll always, if we have a prior approval request in and it takes us a while to act on it, we're cognizant of when it came in, and that is taking time on our side to do that. So we're always aware of that. When we don't get requests in until after something's happened is when it kind of causes a problem. There was a question about, does NIH have a co-PI nomenclature? We know that people are named co-PIs on grants, but it's not a key personnel nomenclature for NIH. We PI and then people that we name specifically in the notice of award are what we consider key personnel. Someone can be called a co-PI, but it's not something that's an absolute recognized role. I hope that answers the question. And then we have another question. In terms of oversight for multi-site grant, what is the recommended frequency of audit by the principal institution? That is not something that we can prescribe. That is based on your institutional policies. What I will say is that there are rules for audits on our end. If you receive funds of a certain amount, you're required to have an audit at a certain point in time, but we can't tell you how to audit your subs or multi-sites. That is something your institution must set in place as your institutional policy. Then I have a follow-up question. Okay, we can only then provide a subcontract for that site and once approval is provided. And this is going back to the change in site where there would be additional administrative approvals. Does that site then only able to claim from 30 days from the approvals provided or from when the time the change in site's requested? So you're going to have to work with your institution on your contracting language, because we don't dictate contract language between one awardee and a sub-awardee. What we'll tell you is that NIH grants have 90-day pre-award spending authority at their own risk. So, and it is at the institution's own risk while we're trying to work on something. Your institution can choose to do that or not. It really is the language of your institution, what you put in your contracts. But again, we'll always consider when you made the request and when we can get the approval to you. So I'm going to say that you need to talk to your institutional authorities about what you allow your sub-awardee before it can get approved.
So while we're waiting for more questions, I'm going to go back to the co-PI nomenclature issue, because this does get a little complicated. So you can have a multi-PI application, in which case you've submitted a plan for multiple investigators to work on this together as they're co-investigators. They're not called co-PIs, but and each of them are equally responsible, although there is one who is a contact and whose institution will receive the primary. And if one of those people are going to leave the project or reduce their time or anything, that is an issue that needs to be discussed with your program officer, as well as grant management needs to be included so that they know what's going on. And you would need to revise your multi-PI plan and get that approved to say that it's okay that it be somebody else or not be one of those people leave. You can have as many collaborators who are PIs as you want to. And then there's the second issue of whether you're going to name them as key personnel or not. If you and the NIH both say that these are key personnel, without them, this project will not be successful.
Sorry, not too much. Not too much. There's some good for us. No,
Thanks. So if you then want to reduce the time committed by a key personnel, including yourself if you're the PI, by 25% or more, I believe it is, then you have to get prior approval for that. So that is one of those things where you would have to submit a request to say that you're reducing their time. And the reason for that, or if they leave, they're going to leave the project, is that we have to work out how that work that you said couldn't be done without them is going to get done. So key personnel is probably the more significant designation in this case in terms of having rules and regulations surrounding them. And Annalise or Deanna, please correct anything that I said incorrectly there.
No, that's correct. What I would say is just to remember that in the multi-PI model, there is no PI that's considered the lead PI. All of the PIs in a multi-PI model have the same authority and responsibility. The difference is that one PI has to be named the contact PI because they are at the awardee institution. And grants management can only have a conversation, email, phone, or otherwise, with the contact PI and the awardee institution, because we're not allowed to discuss grants outside of who we made the award to, which is the institution, not a person. So that's the only difference there. For MPI, everybody's a PI. They have the PDPI. It's just one is the contact for us, and that's why they're all key personnel. Co-PI, which I've heard as well of people named as co-PIs, they're not a PI on the grant. They're not part of the multi-PI model, but they are considered a co-investigator. That's nomenclature that we know that is used, but it's not recognized key personnel nomenclature for us.
Any more questions?
It's Deanna. I actually have a question. This is for Michelle, who's been putting this together for us remotely. Is that we're trying to plan a time to have a more in-depth presentation geared to PIs, and are we also trying to have time to set up some one-on-one so that people can have one-on-one conversations with us?
Oh, so you would like us to organize that with you? Yeah, I think we can do that. To provide the platforms and so on, and the scheduling.
And I hope that that would be something people would want to take advantage of. We definitely have another presentation for another day. It's just the timing on that we're working on. But
Yeah.
But one-on-ones, I think if we could do that, then people could ask their specific questions that they have.
Yes. So we'll try to think of a way to best do that, and then we can also set up a session for the PIs of the next, maybe not this week, of course, the following 2 weeks. We can see what we can do about that. Yeah, certainly.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
Sure.
The other thing I want to emphasize to everybody is if you are confused about something, reach out to us. Deanna or your grant management officer, your program director are all available to help you when you have questions. And it's probably better than to ask than to flounder. So please be sure to feel free to contact us at any point, and we can always arrange a call to discuss issues.
Samir, yes,
Michelle,
we can definitely, yeah, we can definitely share the recording and the slides. Well, then this will include the slides, the recording, yeah.
Samir, I saw that you have a new finance office. Finance officer, you may want to have them reach out to the specialist as well for your award, and talk to them so they can help with that. More than willing to provide some information to that person for you.
Well, thank you very much, Deanna and Annalise, and thanks everybody for joining.
Well, thank you for having us, and I have to say we are just like totally bummed out that we didn't get to come, but again, we understand, with what's going on right now, health and welfare is more important, but we hope to be able to meet with you all soon, someday, in real person time.
I hope so. It'll be great. Thank you so much. We will work on the other sessions as well. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
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 Michelle, the GoToMeeting seems to work really well. So
Bye.
Yes, we thought it would be more, it seems to be a more stable system, quite clear as well. Yeah.
Yep, very clear.
Yeah.
It is very clear even here. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the preparation. Bye.
You're welcome.